Hello, everyone.
Good evening, Dr. Shirk.
Dr. Shirk.
Good evening, Dr. Shirk.
Good evening.
And everyone.
Shirk.
Good evening.
Chuck, how are you? We exceeded our 500 number, so we're going to live stream this, as you saw. And all questions and answers will be posted as we move forward. Daniel, is Dave running the slideshow, correct?
He is.
Great.
I see there's some questions out there already. Should we answer them? Or are they going to be presented and spoken?
I think a question like the first one can just be like, thank you back. I mean, I don't, if it's just,
Hi, Bill.
hi, Bob.
Hey, how you doing?
Bob.
Hello, everyone.
Mr. Lindgren, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing all right. See how this goes tonight, folks.
Everybody have their power? Nobody lost power in that little storm that came through? It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
We did again.
Did you?
Good for that these days.
I was worried, but we were okay.
Good. So I better get my power pack out, right?
Right.
One. So no, really can. We're not having.
I can hear
Oh.
you.
Hi, Madison.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Hey, Daniel, can you hear me? Can you, we call it send? I didn't get the most updated health plan. Can you send that to us, please? The
Sure
one
thing.
Dr. Shirk, you had mentioned yesterday was a 720 version. I have the 716 version.
720 is the most updated version. It's also posted on the website, but I'll send it
On the
directly.
website?
Yes,
go.
Mrs. Bicker posted it there this evening.
All right, I'm on my way over there. Got it. You put myself on mute. That was Bill I was just on the phone with. He's trying to log in.
All right, we'll give it just a minute, wait for Bill. And I know that Patty, I just sent Patty the link, so we're waiting for her to come in as well, but just a brief moment. So we've got 449, 450 people on. We've still got 500 or another 50 people free to join in. So we've got a little bit of room left here. And I think we're live streaming this as well, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, that's Mr. Parker on. So it being 7:05 and everybody knows me, knows that I get itchy. I don't start on time, so that's about as far as I can wait. Thank you, everybody who's joined us. It's now up to 467 of the attendees. Welcome to our town hall. We've been working on this plan for quite some time. I say we collectively. I'm taking credit for things I haven't necessarily had a lot of personal time in on. The administration has been doing the heavy lifting on this one. And when I say the administration, a lot of the folks in the central office, and they've had a lot of input from other members of our staff, including the teachers and lots of other folks. And we on the board have been adding our input. We've had talks with the administration. We've had plenty of time to hear from different parts of the community. This has been weighing on everybody's minds, not just yours in the community who've been listening, but ours as well. We've been putting a lot of thought in on this, and we've had a chance to look at the plan, and we want to get it out to you. We've had talks with the union, and they've had a chance to look at the plan as well and weigh in on it. So there, we've received their thoughts and comments today. And that Dr. Shirk will touch on that in a minute. What we wanted to do before we put this out to everybody to look at was to basically roll it out and give an explanation of what's in the plan tonight. So we asked Dr. Shirk and the administration to basically spend the next couple of hours going through the 55 pages that are in the plan and kind of walk you through and talk you through what's in the plan. This plan was, the template of it was mandated by the state, given to us, if you will, and they asked a number of questions. How are you going to do this? How are you going to do busing? How are you going to do special education? How are you going to do maintenance? How are you going to do these different aspects, sports and athletics? How are you going to do all of these different things? You kind of saw what that was like when we did the plan for athletics and band a little bit earlier. We did that a week or two ago. So it was sort of the same sort of template, but bigger and broader for the education. Dr. Shirk will explain some of that other issues and how we were sort of given a choice, a single choice of three different types of schooling, three different types of plans that we could choose from in terms of how we were supposed to build our plan. That really doesn't reflect how things are going to go. I don't know how many of you understand basically how we're working with the state. State tells us that we have the red, the green, and the yellow options. So under the red, green, the yellow, we have to have different plans, how we're functioning under the red, green, and the yellow. So if the state says today's a red day, well, you don't have any kids in school. You're not allowed to have any kids in school, so you can't just have a single plan. If you're in green, well, then your options are different. And there's other things in between. So to say that you can only pick one plan and say that's going to be your plan and give that to the state doesn't necessarily reflect what the state's own guidelines are for red, green, and yellow. But be that as it may, here we are. So we've tried as best as we could to put the plan together, recognizing the different things, knowing at the same time that the state's guidelines are changing, and we're going to have to change with not only what the state is recommending, but also what's coming out of CDC, knowing that we're also going to have to change with the information as it's changing, knowing that we have to reflect what's going on in our community as the virus changes, as the information changes, as all of the other things change. So please listen to the information that we're going to be putting out there tonight. We do have, I'm not going to try and go through all the things Dr. Shirk is going to put out there. We have a lot of information to convey tonight. Please listen. We've got FAQs and we've got the responses to those FAQs. We're going to have a place where you can post more questions. We have more answers that are going to be coming out in addition to the FAQs that the responses to the FAQs that we're posting tonight. And what we're going to try and do is keep more information going. We're going to look at how the answers and how the questions are coming at us and what they look like. And we're going to try and be responsive to all of the questions and get a tenor for how everything is going. We know that we've already put out a question earlier on, weeks ago, in terms of who wanted to come back to school and who wanted their kids not to be in school. And that was just a very small data point in terms of a very small number of people that responded. We understand that may not be reflective of where we are now. We get that. We have to collect more data. We have to get more information on where people are now. We're going to send out another survey. Nothing is fixed. Everything is floating, but even so, we still have to make decisions. We still have to press forward to end of August, beginning of September, when school in some form or fashion will begin. We are still, our mission at the Potts Grove School District is still to provide education to our children. That is still what we do, and we are going to do that. And we have still to provide choices and options and education to the children of this district. That is our goal, that is our mission, and that is what we will do. And what that looks like for each family is going to be different. But we have to find a way to provide the best education possible to each family. And we are going to work on that with you, with our staff, with our administration, with our teachers, with our union, with our community. Please know that our mission, our job, our function is to work with everyone. All right? Know that that is what we're going to do. So we're going to listen to everybody. We're going to work with everybody. We're not going to shut anybody out. We're not going to not listen to anybody. We're not going to ignore anybody. And we understand that sometimes people may feel frustrated. People may feel as though they're not getting their answers or the responses fast enough. I understand, but we are listening to everyone. We are trying to get to everyone. It's just there's a lot of information coming in. There's a lot of changes going on. And believe it or not, there's just not a lot of people to answer all of the questions and all of the different things going on. So we're listening, we're hearing. We may not be able to process and respond to each and every person as fast as we want to, but we are listening and we are considering and we are trying to get to everything as fast as we can. So that's part of why we're having this town hall tonight, to try and get out to as many people as we can. You can see we have 493 out of the 500 slots are filled. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let Dr. Shirk go ahead and start this meeting. Thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lindgren. And I want to welcome the Potts Grove community. My ticker says 511 plus 150 some on YouTube. So we're pushing the 700 mark. So that is a real testament to our community and our school district. And that is something that probably I'm most proud of when I think about, why I am at Potts Grove is because of that community and how that has always been a traditional piece in a close-knit group. So I appreciate the attendance tonight, and we're going to go right into really the presentation. Mr. Lindgren, again, thank you for your intro, and Dr. Ramage, if you could please put that up for everybody, and then we'll walk ourselves through it. Okay, so obviously tonight we have our phased school reopening health and safety plan. This was brought to our attention really back in May. That just was coming. The actual template was given to us by PDE in mid-June, and during that time period, we have put together groups within our administration, both district office and the principals, as well as teachers, coaches, and most recently, our teachers union had an opportunity. Their leadership team had an opportunity to weigh in, and we'll talk a little bit more later on. Dr. Harney has a piece regarding that, because we want to make sure that we give every group opportunity for us to analyze the information that that they have given us and be able to make good decisions based on that information. So as we move to our next slide, tonight's meeting, we're going to cover our educational options, which I know is in the forefront of a lot of your minds, our plans that we developed, and our phased school reopening. When this meeting kicked off, originally, this was about phased school reopening. And of course, it's morphed to more of the educational processes that we have in place. We're going to answer the Q&As to the best of our ability tonight. We're going to pause between sections so that you have an opportunity, and gives us an opportunity to read and get as many questions answered during this meeting tonight. Understand anxiety and uncertainty are paramount with this really unprecedented time in our history. We do understand that there's a variety of perspectives, and like any piece that we would teach our own children in classrooms, respectful dialogue is going to go a long way with us as we continue to work forward to collecting your questions and answering your questions. So that's just a real brief overview. With that process, I just wanted you to also know that we had over 500 responses to questions prior to tonight's meeting. We had an opportunity, I think about by 3 o'clock today, to answer all those questions. They were put on our website for you to review, and we will continue to add to that list of FAQs as we move forward. As I mentioned earlier, educational options will be discussed tonight. Our phased-in health and safety plan will be reviewed tonight as well, and we'll continue to move forward together. And rest assured that if we can't get to your questions, they will be answered and posted. At this point in time, we have 2 educational options, and I want to explain them to you, the community: hybrid program and our virtual academy program. As we started this process, our original goal was, obviously, as we left the school year, our hope was to be back in all green and get back to the normalcy that we all loved and miss now more than ever. But as the summer has progressed, and we obviously find out that might not be a possibility. And we had a chance to look at our physical plant and our classrooms throughout the district of all our buildings. We soon realized that we could not follow the state and local guidelines, our Department of Health, for social distancing of 6 feet if we went all back in. So with that being said, the hybrid plan was continually brought back to the forefront with our administrative team. So really what has happened now with the hybrid plan is that we will be able to service half our students in each building 2 days a week. And we'll get to the next slide, and you'll be, not yet, but we'll get to that next slide, you'll see that piece. But in-person instruction in each school building 2 days a week. Online will be 3 days a week. The synchronous learning part of the hybrid program will occur mainly on Wednesdays. We're in the process. I had an opportunity to meet and discuss with the board about ramping up the synchronous part of the hybrid program. And we're going to continue to look at more ways to deliver synchronous learning on the off days, which would include a dedicated device or a camera during that time period that would cover those extra days, or those days when a student would be home. The synchronous day will be probably the Wednesday day, because that will allow us to, the teacher who's teaching the hybrid program in the schools, that'll give them the opportunity to have office hours to go back and review work and lessons that was done on Monday and Tuesday, and also prep students for the Thursday, Friday class via Zoom sessions or small group instruction moving forward. So the synchronous at this point would not occur every day. Our goal, and we really feel that once we have our building leadership teams, which started to meet today, they will meet tomorrow, and I'll be meeting next week with the principals to really a check-in to see how their initial meeting with building leadership, which would include obviously all the principals and building leadership, as well as department heads, grade level leaders, as well. So that'll be part of that piece, and we'll get a better idea of some of the needs that will be needed to have more synchronous learning, during that time period. But we feel pretty confident that we have 2 days of learning that'll be face-to-face, as well as a synchronous day on Wednesdays that will help both the Monday, Tuesday group and the Thursday, Friday group as well. We're looking to obviously to have completion of work, practice, and extension of the classroom during this time. And I think I just want to mention this, that we will divide the district into quadrants. So families will go to school together, areas of the district will go to school together, so that we're not having someone go to school who's in lower elementary, and at the middle school, they would be going to school in 2 separate days. We would keep those families together during that time period. So I know that was a question that was brought up earlier, that I just wanted to share that with you as well. The virtual academy piece, if you chose to stay online, those sessions will be both live and recorded. The live instruction will be one that the student will follow their daily schedule. So if you're a middle school or high school student, you have a first period class that's algebra, then ELA and science, whatever it might be, social studies, an encore class, that schedule will be followed. That's a little bit different. That's a lot different really than last year, where we didn't have that continuity piece, and it was varied. We feel that we do have, that's one of the systems that we're going to put in place to allow that daily schedule, recorded supports, and really synchronous learning will take place every day, because those check-ins will occur and lessons will be taught. Please note this piece that I want to share, that I mentioned just a little bit, a second ago, that this week and next, teacher leadership and building leadership are taking a look at the hybrid program and the virtual program, and specifically getting into the weeds with what needs to be done within the next 35 days to be able to really ramp both these programs up. So I just wanted to make sure that was understood, that we continue to work to better those programs. The board is aware of the hybrid program and possibly some things that we need to do to improve that piece. We also felt that the hybrid program has the ability to get kids back to a normal social emotional learning type state, where they get to see their teachers, they get to see their friends, they get to do things that are under this new normal. They get to interact with one another within a school day. Though it be 2 days at this point and online, it's still, we feel, is something that it's worth the effort, if you will, to help those students get back in and move forward. Dr. Ramage. The next slide is really what I was just talking about. And you can see then on Monday and Tuesday, we divide up 2 groups. I think one of the things that you might see is change Group A, Group B to like the maroon and white. As far as that piece goes, that could some subtle changes there. We're thinking about doing that moving forward. But we're looking at a Monday, Tuesday schedule. You see what Wednesday looks like, where teachers would use time for office hours, check-ins, and some of the things I mentioned, small group and pieces like that. And also, it's an opportunity for us, for the teachers, to do face-to-face and remote and professional learning. We feel that needs to be an ongoing feat, that we have to continue to have the checks and balances system of how we're doing. And also, it allows us to do some additional cleaning within our building. So that is an overview of what that schedule would look like. And it's still in the draft form, because one of the things that we are considering with our special education students is obviously a 4 to 5 day week as well. And we're also have not ruled off the table that children in need that need an extra day, that that possibility of coming in for the extra day is also a possibility. You'll hear me say that a lot tonight because this is something new for all of us, and I don't want to close the door on any thought or any options or any needs of our students as we move forward, because they're in the forefront of decisions that we make. And I wanted to really, say that anything's possible, anything will be possible. Our board knows that. We've talked about that many times. As we've gone through the last 2 months together, talking about these particular items. So this is what that would physically look like. The next slide I wanted to share with you is we talked about the Pottsgrove Virtual Academy a little bit in the last 2 slides, but I just want to let our community know that our option in the virtual world is the best option. Most cyber charters are asynchronous learning. You're not going to get the synchronous learning of a teacher that's certified, a teacher that teacher maybe one of your older kids have had. You're going to get personalized learning. We've stepped up our game as far as those pieces go with our curriculum. The curriculum will be our curriculum. It will not be somebody else's curriculum. Some districts are looking at farming those pieces out and just managing that piece. It'll be our curriculum. It'll be taught by our staff. Special education services will be provided in this venue. And what it's going to allow us to do is a seamless transition back, because our goal is to have a seamless education for both the hybrid model and the virtual model, so that when that day occurs, that we can get back into the classroom, at day 35 or day 66, whatever. Both of these educational venues can meet and kids can move forward and their teachers together. Also, in our virtual world at the Academy, students are eligible for all of our co-curricular programs as they move forward. As you know, our Apple technology is one that will be given to all students. We're looking to upgrade our 3.5, our the lower elementary school. We're looking to upgrade those iPads moving forward with technology and supports. And of course, that will also filter K-1. So we'll virtually be a one-to-one school from K to 12. And our tech support will continue, our school support will continue, and of course the district support will continue as well. So we really feel that these highlights and more information will follow about these pieces for those in the community that feel that we might not be in a position to meet your needs. But we really feel when you take a look at the true cyber charter school, look at their educational record, look at their test scores, look at what they offer, and then think about the things that I just mentioned tonight with more information to follow. We feel we can deliver and will deliver a much better product, for our community, with all the amenities really that go with it, as I listed here in front of you tonight. One of the things that I started off talking about tonight was the phased-in reopening and the process and timelines. As I mentioned before, this was required by PDE. We had to incorporate flexibility as you have an opportunity to view the plan, because we had to be able to adapt to any scenario that might come. And we feel that both the hybrid and the virtual model allow us to do that. If we have to transition back to all red and for a period of time, we feel that these plans will allow us to do that. It incorporates that type of flexibility, yet it uses the research and the healthcare agencies from the federal, state, and local government as to where this information come from. When you look at the plan, the Pottsgrove School didn't make these pieces up. We used expertise as far in the healthcare community, from the University of Penn to CHOP to Montgomery County to Bucks County to Chester County, the CDC. You'll see a list of organizations for guidance that we used on the next slide. But we continue to adapt to this change as this process changes. The template was received in June. We continue to analyze the data from when we approve it, and we'll talk more next week about when that special board meeting will be to approve it. It'll be an ongoing work in progress, if you will, that we will continue to update with the latest pieces that we need. And as I mentioned earlier, we had quite a few different teams help us develop this, and as well as guidance from healthcare agencies really across the country. And finally, for this portion of the presentation, the phase school reopening, these are the different organizations that we used to help us make decisions and help us formulate this document. And as I said before, we'll continue to update and look at these pieces. I think we're on the 7th or 8th draft, if you will, because information over the last 6 or 7 weeks when this first came out for us to do, it's ever changing. So at this point in time, I'm going to stop and break back to any of my colleagues who've had an opportunity to answer any questions or answers or generalities that you might see and answer back. So thank you for the opening.
Dr. Sher, can I just jump in for a second?
Yes, sir. Dr. Harney, please.
Wanted to talk about, I know part of it's going to be talking about the groups that worked on this. We did ask our Teachers Association for their input. We received a great deal of it. They put a lot of time and effort into that. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to process all of that before we sent this out to the public. So my promise to them was we are going to review everything that they gave us. We'll answer what we can. If there's anything that we can incorporate into the plan, we will move to do that prior to Tuesday night. But at the bare minimum, we're going to publish all of the concerns and questions that they pose. So everyone knows prior to Tuesday night, when we will be voting on this, that everything was considered and everyone will be able to see what the concerns were of our professional association. So I just wanted to get that out there. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the time to process all that today. And I wanted them to know we appreciated all their efforts, and we are not going to ignore that. We're going to work with that as best we can.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. Before we move on to the next section, I just want to reach out to my colleagues. Is there anything specific that questions and answer wise you want to reach out for at this time?
Dr. Shirk, I would just add that just to encourage the attendees to take a look at the answered section in the Q&A, because we are kind of working our way through some of those that may not have otherwise been answered live. And I appreciate the attendees for posting those good questions.
Thank you, Dr. Presido. I see that there have been 17 questions answered, so appreciate that comment, and we'll have our audience continue to check back in with those pieces. Also, please be reminded that we will archive. Obviously, it's live and we're recording everything, but all the Q&A pieces will be archived and printed as well for you to view in the future. Okay, this time we'd like to move forward, if we can. We'd like to move forward with our cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting our ventilation pieces, which really are the first piece of our plan, and we'll go from there. Dr. Ramage and Mr. Cardwell.
Good evening. I want to first focus on letting everyone know the facilities department has been continually following the new guidelines and recommendations from the CDC, Center for Disease and Control, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, ASHRAE, the American Society of heating, refrigeration, and air conditioning, and the AIHA, the American Industrial Hygiene Association. Those guidelines the new guidelines and recommendation allowed us to form our new standards for disinfecting and sanitizing our buildings and ventilation. Our evening staff of custodians will focus primarily on sanitizing our buildings, which consists of cleaning and disinfecting the entire space within inside the buildings. Our day shift staff will primarily focus on disinfecting high touch point areas and restrooms as directed by the CDC. The facilities department over the last 4 months has been preparing to improve our process with adding new equipment. Our staff will be equipped with electrostatic sprayers, battery operated sprayers, manual sprayers, foggers, which those pieces of equipment we will be discharging EPA regulated hospital grade disinfectant throughout the buildings to provide the most possible safe environment with touch points. We also are in the process of adding additional equipment, UV lighting, germicide technology to enhance our disinfecting process throughout our buildings at this time. Ventilation. ASTRA has recommended that the HVAC equipment, we have that equipment bring in much more fresh air throughout the day. Also continuously bring in fresh air into the buildings 2 hours before the buildings open up and then 2 hours after they close. That process will be monitored throughout the day, adjusting temperatures to make sure we stay within ASTRA standards of keeping the climate comfortable. In addition, we will upgrade our filters, the MERV rating, which is the minimum efficiency reporting value. We use a MERV 8 filter now. Where applicable, we will increase those the MERV rating so it can capture more particles coming through the HVAC system. We believe that taking these necessary steps, it will provide the best possibility of keeping our buildings sanitized, disinfected, and the HVAC system as well operating in a proper way to capture as much particles that go through the systems through its return systems there. So, Mr. Ramich, if you could move on. So, additional piece I will add in there, we have started the process of including hand sanitizing stations throughout the hallways in all of our schools to set up various touch point hand sanitizing stations for the students and staff to have that available as they transition between classes and as well as throughout the day itself. Every hallway will have multiple 4 stations throughout the hall.
Thank you, Jeff. I think at the end, did we miss hearing Jeff at the end there?
Sorry, what did I get cut off on in the elementary school? Sorry.
I do believe.
In our elementary school, each one of the classrooms pretty much have sinks inside them. So we encourage the younger students to be under supervision of their teachers, washing their hands in the classroom setting, using the basic soap and water there with the 20-second rule. but as well, the elementary schools will have hand sanitizing stations in their hallways.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
I just wanted to go back and answer a few questions that I saw in the chat, and I know the team behind the scenes is doing a really good job of answering those questions. The Western Center piece was asked about that building. I wanted to really alert the community that the Western Center is optimal for really social distancing. Their classrooms and their labs will allow the Western Center in the yellow or green phase to continue the educational process. So as we continue to work with Mr. Maritzin down at the Western Center, our goal is to have our students travel down there on their own if they can drive with parent permission, or with busing. And the busing options, we may need to add more buses to promote social distancing of 6 feet or more to the best of our ability with that piece. Obviously, students would wear a mask. And I know there was another question about busing. We're going to ask students to sit together if they're in the same family. But when it comes to the busing during the school day, and Mr. Nestor might be getting this more specifically a little bit later on, but we cannot guarantee that space, with the busing. So I think when we go back to the survey, I think really almost 50% of our community was willing to help drive their students to school. But that is something that we'll have to practice, the use of masks, and then of course, the personal hygiene pieces as well. So I wanted to answer those two questions. I didn't want to jump the gun, but I saw them out there as well. So I thought I'd answer them. Another question too was the days. Could the days be flipped? Could the days change? As I mentioned before, all options are on the table. We just need to get this thing kicked off, and we will review each case. No promises at this point, but we will keep all possibilities open when it comes to the hybrid model, and keeping not only the students' best interests in mind, and if we can help the families in any ways, the working families, we will do that as well. So thank you for allowing me to go back. I appreciate that. And I'm going to pause for a second to see if anybody has any questions regarding the cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, and ventilation for our team or Mr. Cardwell. Okay. Let us move forward.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start with one of the numbers probably we're most in tune with when we talk about COVID. And that's the number, other than 19, it's the number of 6, just in terms of social distancing. As you might imagine, we've looked, as Dr. Shirk shared, we've looked at quite a bit of guidance. Many of those different organizations, health advisories, country, state, local, and really there's differing guidance. Sometimes it's inconsistent with one another. So in the educational world, you see anywhere from 3 to 6 feet. Here in Montgomery County and following our Department of Health, they're really pretty strong on the idea of 6 feet. So here in the district, and you'll see this language pops up a lot, particularly in our plan and also in the guidance that's been provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, they talk about this to the greatest extent feasible. So we're working through that process. Really, that's where the idea for the hybrid program came from, because it's an opportunity for us to get students back in buildings, but we also can make sure that we're maintaining appropriate and safe distancing as well. In addition to that, there's been a lot of questions that have come in about masks and what are the requirements for face coverings. Really, to be totally honest, that's something that's been provided for us per the governor's orders. So we're working through what that looks like. In our current situation, the guidance that we've been provided is students and staff will be wearing a face covering in the building. And actually, the state of Pennsylvania does provide for us exactly what's meant by face covering. It could include a shield, it could include a mask. And there are opportunities throughout the school day when students and or a staff member could take those off. But there's certain conditions that need to be met in order for that to occur. So for example, if students are 6 feet away from one another and these are kind of ands, not ors, 6 feet away from one another and they're seated at their desks, they may take off their mask. If students, again, if they're 6 feet apart and they're engaged in some sort of physical activity, they can take off their mask. Or obviously for eating and drinking purposes, but again, still maintaining that 6 foot distancing. We're also working within our building level teams to build in breaks because everybody needs a break from a mask just to get outside, get some fresh air. So that's part of our conversation as we're working through what face coverings look like and how to meet that mandate. We're also working through the process of really walking through all of our classrooms and determining unnecessary, really furniture that might be in classrooms that's just unneeded. So our priority there is to use every inch of available space that we have. And many of our teachers, particularly at the elementary level, like to make their classroom feel like a home. But that's not kind of the world we live in right now. So, we're moving out anything that could give us additional space, and we're working through that process. Again, that will help with the 6 feet of distancing throughout that process as well. One of our goals will be to limit the movement of students throughout the school day, again, to the greatest extent possible. So at the elementary level, it's easier to keep students together. They kind of live in their own little cohort at the elementary level. At the secondary level, we're working, because of teacher certifications and the specificity of courses, it's a little more difficult to do that. So again, our goal is to minimize the movement of students to the greatest extent that we're able to do that. What we're looking at, there have been a lot of questions about lunch, what that will look like, and we're looking at a number of options. But at this point in time, really at the elementary level, we're looking at lunch provided in classrooms. In our secondary levels, it does include the use of cafeterias. However, we're using all available space. So it could include the use of an auxiliary gym because there's some pretty stringent guidelines there. Students are not able to sit face to face. They all need to be facing a certain direction. Again, they're spaced 6 feet apart. And we're also working through some other pieces in terms of prepackaged meals, not near the selection that on a typical school day there might be. So, really limiting the number of choices that might be offered. One of the things that we're really working on is respiratory etiquette. So just ongoing communication, teaching, training, posting, announcements about what that really means. And I use that word training strategically because it's a training of our students. It's a training for our teachers, just to remind everybody of this world that we live in right now and the importance of the mitigation efforts that we're working through. I think Mr. Cardwell already talked about hand sanitizer, and that becomes part of that ongoing communication. And then the final piece on this particular slide is really just looking at visitors within the building. So really at this point in time, we're working toward only staff and students being allowed within the building, specifically beyond the main office. And then we'll be working with families. So if a family or a parent needs to have a parent meeting, we'll be working through that process virtually to get that scheduled to make sure that any individual needs are met throughout that process. Dr. Ramage, would you like to go on to the next slide, please? One of the things that we look at on this slide, and as many people know, our board already approved our health and safety plan for athletics and marching band. And that was really done because of out of necessity of time, just the timing of when seasons begin and what kinds of things occur over the summer. Within that plan, it's detailed how we're dealing with sporting events and what that looks like. But there's also a part of our larger phase school reopening health and safety plan that includes things related to our handling of sporting events. What does physical education classes look like in those opportunities? So I'll talk through a couple of the highlights there, and then I'll make sure I pause for both Mr. Ansbach as well as Mr. Nestor in terms of anything they might add in terms of sporting, as well as when we talk about transportation here as well. So really looking at our physical education classes, we're really looking for physical education classes and really particularly music classes, anything that involves singing, wind instruments, for example, to occur outside. Of course, that's weather permitting. Our building level teams are really working through the building to look at all available instructional space that they have. So in the event that it's not weather permitting, they have other places for these types of activities to be provided. One of the things that we're really working to do, and this really crosses into both sports, but also certainly into classrooms, is really limiting the sharing of materials that occurs. And that's no easy task, as you know, because we generally, as a society, like to be around one another. So really, we're working on some specific things. For example, students and staff bringing water bottles from home, as we won't be using water fountains for obvious reasons. Looking at specific ways to separate students' belongings, students having their own little bin that they carry with them throughout the day. That's their bin with their supplies and only for them. It's just another opportunity to, again, limit any sharing that might occur across or within the school day. Locker rooms, lockers and restrooms are really, I'll call it a limited and scheduled opportunity within the building. Speaking directly with our middle school and high school principals and really our teachers, the elimination of lockers is fairly difficult. However, we can limit that. And again, what we're trying to do is not have, for example, even if we only have 600 students or 500 students in the high school building at a time, we don't want all 500 of them at the lockers at the same time. So again, that will be a scheduled use, and as well as the restroom. Certainly, we understand that we work outside of those schedules, but again, it's just an effort to limit the numbers that will be going through there. Building schedules will be staggered so that the number of students that will be in the hallway is limited, so that when students are passing one another or transitioning through hallways, again, our building level teams are looking at some hallways that perhaps might be directional or one way, just again to kind of mitigate the spread of anything. Mr. Ansbach, in terms of sporting events, is there anything that you might want to add that I may not have talked about?
Just regarding locker rooms, I mean, they're listed as communal spaces, so they'll be limited. Students in the hybrid virtual model will ask them if they're coming on practice days and competition days to come dressed. Well, obviously we'll limit it, follow the social distancing guidelines, and clean them between use. Just one other question regarding busing that I'm seeing is if they're in a hybrid model or they're in the virtual academy, will transportation be provided to bring those students back to campus? And right now, due to availability and just drivers, that busing will not be available to bring those students back to campus for practice. So from the athletic end, and I guess the last piece, spectators, from the government's guidance as far as return to play for athletics, in the yellow green phase, they are just limited to coaches, athletes, and coaches, athletes, officials, and staff only as of right now in the yellow and green phase. That's all I have on the athletic end.
Okay. Mr. Nestor, anything in terms of busing that you wanted to talk about?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Voorhees. It's it's relatively obvious that the 6-foot social distancing requirement is unable to be achieved on a school bus. If that were the case, we'd only be able to transport 8 to 10 students on a 72 passenger school bus. The state has recognized this issue. It has been a very trying time to come up with a plan to do the transportation for school students. But what the state guidance has provided to us is that two students per seat is acceptable. We'll be expecting those students using transportation to wear face coverings during their trips to and from school. And when possible, we will transport them with the windows open to provide enough fresh air to mitigate the transfer of any virus in the bus vehicle itself. It's not a perfect situation, but it is an option for parents to get their children to school if they need it. We will be asking parents later this week to tell us what their transportation plans are. This won't be a mandate, but it will be, we'll use this to help us to route our buses to try and achieve the best scenario possible. We do open in a hybrid model. By definition, that would reduce the numbers on the buses by about 50%. And if we have a large number of families choosing the Pottsgrove Virtual Academy, that will further reduce the number of students on the buses. And what we will be doing is we will be using our entire fleet to transport half the students. So it should result in a much better scenario than what we've experienced in the past as far as student population on the buses. But there could be instances where there's two children per seat. That's what I have now on transportation.
Dr. Kirk, just to finish up on this particular section, I know a couple of questions that I saw. One is just involving the selection of educational options, what you would like for next year, in addition to, as Mr. Nessler just spoke about, was the transportation selection as well. That communication will be going out tomorrow with a communication from Dr. Shirk. And as indicated in an earlier timeline, families will have until next Thursday, I believe, June 30th, in order to make that selection. And that communication will include exactly how you make that selection, how you notify the district. When you make that selection, we're asking families not to commit for the entire year, but more it's a commitment for a marking period at the secondary level or the first trimester at the elementary level. And certainly we recognize that things might come up in between there. We're trying to keep families in one particular piece. So I know another question is, will students be allowed to move? At the end of the day, we want our students to be successful. So the answer isn't a hard no, but we also know that consistency is good for our students as well. So we'll be working through that process. And as you're making those selections, again, note that it is for the beginning, really up until that November-ish timeframe. And hopefully at that point in time, we will have a greater understanding in our health department. Perhaps we'll have provided additional information about what the spread of COVID looks like at that time, and we can make decisions for the future with that information.
Mr. Boris, if I could just jump in, I appreciate that explanation. Thank you. I wanted to let everybody know that you can make a statement, obviously, that if someone asks a question in Zoom and you're anonymous attendee, we will not, it won't be answered. So we need you to put your name in that, and that'll help us identify you, and then that'll get your question to the queue so we can answer that. So just make sure you identify yourself. We're finding some people are not identifying themselves, so we'd appreciate that. That really helps us out. And it helps us out from the standpoint of knowing our constituents so we can best answer the questions and best plan. So sorry for the interruption, Mr. Voris. Please continue.
Thank you, Dr. Ramage. You're ahead of me there, already advancing the slide. Thank you. These are inclusive of some, or at least try to categorize some of the questions that we saw coming in regarding anything in the world of social distancing. So the first is really, I think Mr. Nestor already described the social distancing piece on a bus and the guidance that we've been provided and why we're working through that process. So I think Mr. Nestor had answered that particular piece. Another question is, will walkers still be allowed to walk? The answer there is yes. And a question that sort of comes along with that is, what does parent pickup look like? Of course, our parent pickups, whether picking up in a car or walking out front to pick up a student to walk home, certainly we understand that process is going to look different and needs to look different, again, because we need to maintain appropriate social distancing. There was questions about lunch. We talked about lunch being really served in classrooms at the elementary level, at the secondary level, really using some cafeteria spaces, auxiliary gyms, alternative spaces, really to maximize social distancing. We're using disposable food service items whenever possible. And we spoke about lunch items and options being reduced and including prepackaged meals. One special note there is we will continue to work through food allergies. That is certainly not something that we've forgotten about. So that's something that we're working through the process no matter what. Where students are eating, we're working through that process as well. Face coverings, I think I covered, speaking exactly about where that comes from, the governor's order there, and some of those exemptions that exist. However, from recent guidance that I believe we received from the state, I believe on July 16th, last week sometime, Dr. Shark, I believe, it really states that any exemptions would be included in a student's IEP and or 504 in terms of exemptions for mask wearing. Outdoor spaces was a question that somebody has, and I think I saw it over in the Q&A section as well. What do outdoor spaces look like? As I said, our building level teams are right now spanning the building for every available inch of space that we can use, and that includes outdoor areas as well. And of course, that's weather permitting, so we're working through that process. Another question was, will students be in the same classroom all day? And actually, I think that the question that came through was specific to high school. Really at the elementary, the answer is no for anybody. Again, as I said, we're working with recognizing that students and staff are going to be wearing face coverings. There's going to need to be opportunities for everybody to get outside, or at least get to a point where they can remove the mask for a bit. So we're working through that process. Certainly students at the high school and even in the middle school, again, with certifications, students will be moving throughout the building, but again, looking at directional hallways, face coverings, and those various pieces. Social distancing in the hybrid model, I think we spoke about that with using every inch of space, removing any non-essential materials that might be in the classroom to maximize that space. And really, somebody asked about lockers. Are we using lockers? Again, yes, the answer is we will be using, students will be permitted to use lockers. However, that will really be a scheduled and limited use. So as I was speaking and answering those questions, I'll ask my colleagues, anything else related to social distancing that came up in the Q&A while I was speaking that we could answer now?
I'll jump in quickly with one as I'm trying to answer some of the questions in the Q&A as we go through. There were several that asked about the number of students in the classroom. And while Mr. Nestor was able to talk about a bus, which is basically the same physical space in each bus, each full-size bus. Classrooms do vary. So I'm not sure that there's one straight answer other than we will follow the social distancing guidelines to determine how many people would fit in a particular classroom. That's one question that's come up a couple times.
Dr. Ramsey, I'll just jump in. I know Mr. Carwell, we did this way back, really way back in June to see what it looked like. And depending on the classroom, it could be like 9 to 12 students. And again, that'll vary from building to building, and that'll be building specific as far as those options are concerned. We do understand there could be pieces of that where we'll have overflow rooms, or we'll have to move a particular class to a particular area. There's some logistics there that need to be worked out in each of the buildings. And but that's a fair question. And again, some of those pieces really are just because of our physical space. We're limited in that hybrid piece, but our goal is to accommodate those students and those teachers. Thank you.
And Mr. Boris, I'll just clarify 2 points because I've seen several questions specific to face masks. There are universally, teachers and staff will be wearing them, as you mentioned, but there are provisions. I know that there are some families that have specific concerns regarding some medical issues, and there are some provisions that will be made and will be documented to accommodate the needs of those children. And the other question, kind of theme that I'm seeing, is about visitors, and really limiting visitors into the building is guidance that districts have received. It's the safest thing that we can do, but I do want to clarify that any of the related services that children need, that will still be provided. Those are either our own employees or contracted services, and we have a system in place to allow that to happen.
Thank you, Dr. Presido. Give a second just to pause before we move on to the next slide.
Dr. Sher, can I get clarification? So there was a couple questions and I was about to answer one. I don't want to answer it incorrectly. I know the answer, but I don't trust myself sometimes. Will computers be provided to students choosing to do virtual schooling? And we'll be providing iPads K-5, correct? And then laptops 6 to 12?
Actually, the iPads will be in the middle school as well. iPad.
Okay. K-8.
K-8, okay.
K-8, yeah, thank you.
And that's what they have now, correct, in the middle school?
Correct.
So middle school and high school stays virtually the same, and we're adding the K-2 iPad for students who don't have them at all now.
Actually, and I'll just weigh in quick, and then Dr. Ramage, you can jump in. But we are upgrading. Last year we pulled iPads from our iPad carts for 3, 4, and 5. So what we're doing this year is actually purchasing a unit for the student in 3, 4, and 5, and then we'll repurpose remaining iPads for our K1 and 2 students. Dr. Ramage, is that clarified?
The end result is correct, but over the past several years, Mr. Bickert and his crew, we've tried to push down into more of a one-to-one setting. There's always been some devices, but for several years, grades 2 through 5 have had access to one iPad per student. They didn't routinely leave the building, so that's what changed in the spring. When we left the building, we wanted to send devices to families where they were needed. There is some adjustment to try to get get the oldest iPads that aren't necessarily up to the task anymore after 6 or 7 years or more of use in the system. So that's where some of the purchasing will help us to push down. So we've had one-to-one access. One way to think about it is from grades 2 all the way through 12 for at least a couple of years. And K1 is where we really need to, shift and make sure that we can access all those families that are in need as well. So currently, with what you mentioned, Dr. Shirk, because we're looking at some of the purchases to do that, we should be able to supply K through 12 for families.
Thank you, Dr. Owens, for that clarification. From my group, is there any other commonalities and questions at this time you would like to answer or jump in before we move on to the monitoring of student and staff health? Excuse me. Okay, let us proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Shirk. The next section, moving on, monitoring student and staff health. This begins on page 30 of the document for anybody who's interested, and I'll just go through some key highlights here that I know people have questions about. First of all, there's been a lot of conversation about symptom screening, and we've consulted many agencies that Dr. Shirk listed earlier regarding the guidance on this issue. Students, of course, with their parents and staff are going to be asked every morning to conduct a self-symptom screening prior to coming to school. And in addition, staff will be asked to complete a certification daily that they have conducted that self-screening. So we feel like that's a really important step in catching things early and limiting that contact. In addition, our staff will be trained to monitor for symptoms throughout the school day as needed, and of course, keep eyes on students to the greatest extent possible, as well as colleagues. This next part, 6 feet and 15 minutes, any individual who has been identified as having come in contact with someone who tests positive should also be tested. And when we say contact, that's where the 6 feet, 15 minute rule is going to be applied. So contact, if you were within 6 feet, or if that individual was within 6 feet for a duration of 15 minutes, certainly the recommendation that you would also be tested. Of course, with all components of this plan, we're going to be in very consistent communication with the Montgomery County Department of Health regarding all types of things, potential exposure, contact tracing, as well as ongoing guidance and collaboration to make sure that we're as prepared and on top of this through every single step of the way. Regarding absences, you've heard from my colleagues throughout this presentation, communication and partnership is essential, even now more than ever. So if students are absent, or staff for that matter, and if that absence is related to suspected or confirmed case of COVID-19, communicating that with the proper school officials immediately is going to be a really essential part of this plan, and we just need everybody to really be on board with that. We're in the process of developing 2 questionnaire tools, actually, which I think will be incredibly helpful. The first is a questionnaire tool because we know that the social, emotional, and mental health needs during this pandemic are significant among all of our population and community. So one questionnaire that we're working on is to consistently have a pulse on where the needs are for social emotional needs of our staff, students, and families, and how we can be supportive and implement some services when appropriate. The second questionnaire tool that we are developing is in regard to potential exposure. So we'll be asking families and staff on a bi-weekly basis some key questions that will help us target whether there is an increased risk of exposure, and types of things that would be explored on that questionnaire include travel, and specific travel to targeted areas where infections are higher at any given point in time. I mentioned that mental health monitoring is going to be a key component of this plan. Physical health, mental health really run in tandem, and we have lots of services and supports in the wings for when that is necessary.
Dr. Presido, could I jump in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
While we're not going to be taking every child's temperature as they come to school, The district is in the process of purchasing infrared cameras that will be placed at the entrances of each of our buildings, which will allow us to identify both staff and students that enter the building that have an elevated temperature, so that we can direct them to the nurse's office or to a isolation area for questionnaire to be administered to those staff or students.
Thank you, Mr. Nestor. And I'll talk a bit more about isolation areas and well rooms in just a few minutes. So, but I appreciate that. Dr. Ramage, I think we're ready for the next slide. So I mentioned travel briefly. We're aware of the travel restrictions. Those are changing. We're ever monitoring them. We will request and recommend that any student or staff member or family that travels to these more highly infected locations, that upon their return to our community, that they do self-quarantine for 14 days prior to returning to school. And again, hitting on that communication piece, communicate with the appropriate school personnel, and we will excuse me, be prepared to support that student or staff member with a plan in place so that it's not just days missed. Our social workers will be actively involved in the monitoring of attendance so that we can code that appropriately and kind of all work together through this new environment. So in the event that an individual is showing symptoms, that child, that adolescent, that adult will immediately go to an isolation area within that particular building. At that point in time, we will communicate. Obviously, the school nurse will be involved in doing symptom screenings. We'll communicate with the family. It is the district's expectation that if there are symptoms, that the family, as soon as possible, come pick up the student and have that student begin a self-quarantine, coordinate with that family physician, and if healthcare is needed, that take place. In addition to that, if there is someone that is showing symptoms, we would communicate with the Montgomery County Department of Health, and if appropriate and recommended, we intend to release seating charts to them detailing anyone that was within that 6 feet for that 15-minute duration within the previous 48 hours. So we just appreciate everybody's partnership in this as well. It's heavily nuanced, as you can see. So I mentioned a moment ago when Mr. Nestor was speaking regarding quarantine location. In every one of our district buildings, the principals have been working with their teams to identify an additional health location. So each one of our buildings will be equipped with a well room. The well room will serve the purpose primarily of medication dispensation as needed throughout the school day. It is our intent to limit one student in the well room at any given point in time. In addition, we are locating and arranging isolation rooms in each building. Those rooms would be reserved for if a student or staff member is demonstrating symptoms, that student or staff member would go to the isolation room. It will be properly vented. It will have its own access door, and any nurse or staff member that would be responsible for the supervision of that general area will be equipped with full PPE. I think we're ready for the next one. Communication is essential. I think I start every slide off with that message. School personnel really must be alerted if a student or a staff member is returning from quarantine. We want to make sure that we have a really sound transition plan in place, that everyone is well, that everyone is feeling okay about that re-entry, and that we're addressing whatever associated mental health needs may be involved as well, including, we're not intending to have any lapses of instruction given our virtual offerings as well, but we just want to make sure that we have a very smooth transition plan for everyone involved. So again, hitting that communication component. Our social workers and our school counselors are prepared to assist families with community resources in this ever-changing time. Excuse me. They'll also be working with families to ensure two-way communication so that if there are absences associated with COVID symptoms or a confirmed COVID case, that we are really working with families in that way to properly document and make sure that everything is okay and we're not sending truancy notices. That's certainly not our intent. So again, processes for return. I just want to reemphasize, and I know that there are a lot of questions in the chat about this that we can certainly address too. So if an individual, staff or student member has tested positive, that student or staff member can return to school when the following conditions are met. So the first of those conditions is that the student or staff member needs to be fever-free for 3 days. And that includes, we've all done this, maybe I have, no fever reduction, medications, but legitimately fever-free for 3 days, as well as symptom-free. That's the second component of that. And it needs to have been at least 10 days past since the onset of the first symptoms. So if those conditions are met, we welcome students and staff members back into the building. If we have a student or a staff member who has been exposed but has not yet or not at all tested positive, that individual should remain at home for a period of 14 days after that exposure. And we'll be, if you have questions, certainly reach out, but we'll be working in communication with staff and families to make sure that those processes are really in place and adhered to. And again, like I said, building teams will design a return to school plan for each individual. I'm seeing some questions in the chat, and I'll make sure that I circle back to those in just a moment. But I want to move on to, actually, you know what? Let me pull. Give me 1 second.
Dr. Procida, if you want to stop and review that, if that would help your explanation piece, feel free.
Sure. Well, I'm seeing what processes will be followed if someone tests positive for COVID-19. And I know that this is the forefront of everybody's mind. So I just want to make sure that it's crystal clear. How will tracing and testing happen, and what will communication look like? So the steps really that are very clearly articulated in our plan, we want to make sure that the individual leaves the isolation area, goes immediately home or to a healthcare facility to begin that quarantine period. We will work in conjunction with our HR department to ensure that we initiate the internal protocols that are necessary for notification, et cetera. We will, as I stressed earlier, notify the Montgomery County Department of Health and work in tandem with them in terms of alerting and sanitizing, and we'll be in touch with our facilities department. Obviously, we'll initiate that contact tracing that Mr. Cardwell talked about earlier. That includes who is the individual in contact with while in school, and we'll go through all of those previous steps. Who is the individual in contact with on the bus, if he or she is a bus rider? Who are the siblings, if there are any? Other family members that perhaps are living in the home. And we really want to determine all of the impacted areas of the building that individual would have come in contact with. Once we identify those, and we will do so expeditiously, once we identify those areas that have been identified, we will close those down for 24 hours. Those areas of the building will all be shut down for 24 hours. And after that 24-hour period, our team will clean, sanitize, and disinfect all of those impacted areas. We'll continue to work with the Department of Health and seek their guidance. And we would also communicate with the students and families as appropriate, while also maintaining, our HIPAA compliance, but work with students and families as appropriate who may have been affected.
Dr. Procida, let me jump in real quick there, just so everyone knows. There's very strict protocols around what they call close contact, where we actually then would reach out to people who had a close contact. So we'll be following the state and local guidelines around the notification piece, because the HIPAA concern is there. but there are some very strict protocols around close contact. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that, Dr. Harney. So anybody seeing anything in the Q&A on this topic that should be addressed right now?
Dr. Pacito, I know you're trying to talk, so I'm reading through and trying to answer some of these too. And this is a fuzzy area, I'm sure, but I'm seeing a number of questions about, well, what if a student just sneezes a lot? What if it's allergies? What if it's a fever due to sunburn? What if we're not sure? So maybe you want to address what we would normally do and how some of that will remain and some may shift.
Sure, and again, I'm a broken record. Communication is key. The more that we know, and I know our district families are really great about informing our teachers and staff and our nurses about pre-existing conditions. We will have open dialogue. We will err on the side of caution. So please don't be alarmed. I hope that makes everybody feel safe to know that, we'll do temperature checks and we'll do symptom screening just to be sure. And we'll be in communication with you because we just want to be implementing all of the procedures that we can at this point to make sure students and staff are safe. But we do know that, some kids, because of a condition or just their bodies, they generally have a slightly elevated temp, and some kids have allergies, and there are all types of things to be considered, and we're going to work through those on a case-by-case basis.
Dr. Pacito, can I jump in again just because I just was through this in a meeting the other day. We may be requesting medical verification on some of these pre-existing conditions that could mask as symptoms of COVID. So as Dr. Pacito talked about, the communication is going to be very important. We also may need some from both staff and students, some medical documentation as to, patient X, yes, they do constantly have sinus headache, X, Y, and Z. So I just want to put that out there if people understand that we do have the right and may ask for medical documentation.
Okay, if there's not anything else right now that any of my colleagues are seeing, I think we're good to move on to the next slide. So I just discussed the process for positive cases. Symptom screening, again, Mr. Nestor touched on the infrared devices that are being investigated and installed. Aside from that, we are asking families, and we will distribute protocol for this. We'll be specific with what we're asking you to do a quick symptom screening of your child before he or she leaves to go to school in the morning. We'll be asking the same of our staff and asking that they complete that certification form daily. Our shutdown thresholds, I saw some questions in the chat about this and some that were submitted in advance as well. This is a really tough question. If you think back to the spring, we didn't have a whole lot of notice. We will continue to partner with the Montgomery County Department of Health, and we would receive guidance from them on how to proceed if we had, single or multiple confirmed cases. We unfortunately may not have the luxury of a whole lot of lead time in the event of a shutdown. And I know that Dr. Shirk mentioned this earlier. It's an inconvenience for all of us. Everybody has been as graceful as possible in this situation. None of us are exempt from, the frustrations and the sacrifice. And I'm with you right there. But there's a possibility of a shutdown, and there's just really no way of knowing how much notice we would have of that. Anything you want to add to that, Dr. Shirk?
No, I appreciate that, because we were on a conference call last week with Val Arkush, one of the county commissioners who heads the health department, and her staff, and she really could not give us a direct answer with that piece at all. And from the county standpoint, I share too that the county's struggling with testing. And I think that's important that we all understand those pieces, because right now the results to get back from testing are 14 days. That does not help us. So the county is moving to find a new vendor, and even moving to hire airplane drivers, if you will, to transport tests to North Carolina, where it seems to be they can get a turnaround in 2 or 3 days. So that's just a small example of some of the pieces that we have to deal with as a community when we ask for help from our local healthcare authorities, and it doesn't always come our way. So it's just another example of being patient. We appreciate that, and we will continue to work with you on those pieces and give you as much lead time as possible, because we understand how that benefits all of us. Thank you.
Seeing a few questions about if a student is in quarantine and at home, will they be able to participate virtually? And we are obviously working at a very fast pace to figure out all of the details of exactly what that will look like, but that's everybody's intent. We don't want anybody to miss school unnecessarily if they're feeling well enough and just can't physically be in the building. So that is certainly a goal that we are working toward. What will your full PPE consist of? It will vary depending upon the classroom or the particular role, but we have masks, shields, aprons, arm guards. We have plexiglass that we've already been using to do some face-to-face multidisciplinary evaluations. So we are getting everything that's available. Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. This slide is in reference to other considerations for students and staff, and certainly there are many, many more than are listed here and as evidenced by our Q&A. I think we talked at length about the face coverings for all. I'll just reiterate one stipulation there. For students that have medical conditions that aren't able to safely put on or remove a mask independently, there is an ability for an exemption in those limited cases. There will be a process. It will need to be documented and legitimate, but we do understand that there are some specialized populations that won't be able to wear the mask. Students with complex needs. We have many students with complex needs, and I'm hosting, and I hope you saw in the Q&A, and I'll give the details here. We're hosting a specific session like this one that will be interactive for parents and guardians that have students that receive special education services through the district. There are many, many nuances. Everything is individualized for those kids, and it will continue to be. So I don't think this is the appropriate forum to get too much into the weeds, but I know that many people have a lot of questions. I want to reassure you that we will have procedures in place. So if you are a hybrid student, if your child is a child that's coming because he or she has significant complex needs and has been identified as needing school more frequently face-to-face, or if you're a fully virtual family, we will be able to fully implement the specially designed instruction that's in your current IEP in any of those scenarios. We've been having lots of conversations about it. Certainly there might be some things that just simply aren't applicable if you're working from your living room, and we'll have those conversations with individual families. So I sent out and I sent an email to all of the families in our district that are in this category. I sent it yesterday. There's a Google form. I want your questions. I will answer all of them to my greatest ability. And I want your comments and feedback, and we will meet next week on the 29th at 9 a.m. There's no perfect time that everybody's available. If you're not able to be there, we will post the Q&A and just call. Dr. Cantor and I are always available to have a conversation with you. There are some questions about 504s. 504s are for students in general education that need accommodations. We can absolutely implement the accommodations in any setting, and your student's school counselor is the best point of contact for that. again, there might be some things that just don't make sense in a different setting, and things that could be more effectively done. And we can talk to you collaboratively if there are any revisions made, but please know that any setting, we're prepared to implement those services and accommodations. And again, we've had a lot of conversation tonight, but I just want to circle back to where Dr. Shirk began. We are excited about the virtual option that's being crafted. We know that it's an option that's going to meet many families' needs, and we encourage you to really carefully consider that. We would love to have your kids be Pottsgrove kids, and they could seamlessly go back and forth. So that's really important to us. I think I should take a look at the Q&A, but that concludes my piece.
Again, as I'm just reading through to maybe help there are some things that are more dedicated to IEP and special needs, which I know you've touched on, but we'll get further in-depth investigation on the 29th. I don't know if this falls under exactly what you're talking about, but I'll bring it up because another trend I saw was relating to either before and after school programs from the YMCA or transportation to daycare options and what that will look like in our COVID world.
Dr. Ramage, if I may, I just, the YMCA for before and after care, we are going to schedule time to meet very soon. I know we had a correspondence today via email with Scott Cusworth and to Y. So maybe more information will follow, and then we can add that. We can put that up on the web as well. But those conversations are going to be had, with our YMCA pieces.
With regard to other daycares, we would continue to transport from the daycares located in Pottsgrove School District to the schools, and from the schools back to those daycares if necessary. Obviously, we have no control over the social distancing aspects that are taking place at those locations. So we would count on the parents and hopefully those daycare centers to notify us if an issue were to occur in their setting.
Thank you, Mr. Nestor. Doctor, before we move on to the last slide, I just want to go back and ask any of our team members here tonight, I know you're doing so already, scanning the chat room, or any comments that you would like to make that you might have thought about that have come up in the chat, or things that we didn't mention that we'd like to mention at this time for our community.
Dr. Shirk, I did see a couple of questions regarding when parents will be notified about, are they on Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday? And I think we obviously don't know that information yet because we don't know parents' intent yet. However, once we receive that information, I think our goal would be to, as expeditiously as possible, in order to let families know so that they can make preparations.
That is correct. Thank you.
Another general piece that came up a couple times was the question that can parents, if they choose a hybrid, can they choose whether their children will be in the A group or the B group, or can they have one student attend on A days and another child in the household attend on a B day? And I think, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think that by design, we're trying to target the bus stops so that we're getting approximately 50% of our students. we're benefiting from having family members ride together when they're busing, as Mr. Nestor mentioned. So I think the expectation would be you choose the model, and then as we receive information from across the entire district, we'll have a sense of who would be assigned to the A group and who would be assigned to the B group. Is that an accurate way to address that, Dr. Shirk?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Dr. Orange. That was well put. And I think, as I mentioned throughout this piece, everything's a possibility. We just have to get our structures in place, obviously, and then we'll as we get more details, we'll then follow through back with you and do the best we can to accommodate the families, as long as it stays within that structure.
Dr. Shirk, another question I saw is, are families making decisions for all the students in their household, or are they making decisions for each student? My reply has been, you're making decisions based upon the unique needs of each student. So, for example, if you have 2 children, one would benefit from the virtual academy and one would benefit from hybrid. That's quite all right, and we would honor that request.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Boris.
Can I jump in real quick? I've seen a couple of questions on here about, maybe it was answered and I missed it. Do students have to use the school supplied computer or iPad, or will they be able to do this work on their home computers?
I'll jump in on that one, but since it's going to be web-based work, either through curriculum resources, whether that's synchronous or asynchronous, all they really need is access. If they choose to use their device, there shouldn't be any reason why they couldn't use a home device. And one of the things, without getting too specific, Class Link is another. It's a program that Mr. Bickert has set up with his team, which is a really nice way to give one-stop shopping to all the programs and pieces that any student would need, K to 12, teachers for that matter as well. So by setting up that one website at home on a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, a phone for that matter, a smart device, the student can get to the same launching point for all their resources, whether it's a school device or whether it's a family's personal device.
Mrs. Custer, thanks for bringing that up, and Dr. Ramage with your answer. I'll just give another minute for our panel to look at anything specifically that they would like to bring back up.
Just one, I saw 2 questions, and if we want to talk about asynchronous and synchronous, they're 2 words that we haven't used a lot until the last 6 or 7 months. So there was a question of what that means. And I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Boris, if you'd answer that in specific for me. I think I could do it, but I botched up that one question on technology, so I think I'm going to take a step back.
Dr. Harney, could you repeat the question? Because I was answering another question and I missed it. I apologize.
Sure. Just give a good definition of synchronous and asynchronous, because they aren't terms we used a lot until recently. And there was a question on there. I actually saw 2 that had that similar question.
Actually, you know what, Dr. Ramage, do you want to speak about that? Just because I know you had a beautiful document earlier today.
I would be happy to. I would be happy to address it. There's no guarantees I'll remember what I wrote down previously, because there's been a lot of words leaving my fingertips to the keyboard lately. But in terms of synchronous and asynchronous, they're sort of unusual words. You're right, but one, we might substitute real time. So a synchronous activity or synchronous learning would mean that even if I'm remote, my instructor or my classmates and I are together in a virtual space. We're actually doing synchronous communication right now. Asynchronous would mean, as Mrs. Bickert archives this and puts a recording up, someone who couldn't attend tonight can benefit from watching through and getting the same information or completing the same tasks from a pre-recorded piece. So, you know, when we show up together on site, we've in the past, we've always done basically synchronous learning for the bulk of what we do. But there are times that we still support students and ask them to leave in a face-to-face model and work on things at home. So in a sense, when we're providing materials, whether it's videos or workbooks or learning tasks, they're engaged then in non-real-time activities. So those are really the two pieces. Hybrid would use both types. And our virtual academy would use both types. We're trying to increase the amount of synchronous learning that would go on in both models, but both real-time and sort of pre-recorded supportive elements will be part of each model.
Dr. Shirk, I also saw another question regarding the 6-foot rule, specific to if in fact a student is test positive at some point in terms of what does the contact tracing look like for that. According to the guidance that we're using really from the Montgomery County Department of Health, and they will be our partners in this because we need to rely on their feedback as health professionals. When we get into contact, if and when we get into contact tracing, we really need to be able to identify any student or staff member that's been within 6 foot of the individual that tests positive for 15 minutes or more over the previous 48 hours. So we need to be, that's just another example of how careful and thoughtful and strategic we need to be even about our classroom seating charts so that we're able to depict exactly what that looks like.
And Mr. Vorst, I'm thinking I'm looking on page 36 of the manual. On the part of the panel, if you have that, I think that's, people can refer to the manual. I think that's everything you just talked about right there.
That's correct. It's right in our plan.
Yeah, so you can go back and reference that piece as well, because obviously that's something that's not going to change for us. And if you look at those of you who have the manual up, you know, you think about July 16th was when that was finalized. So that was just last week. So, you know, that's why I want to just, you know, let you know that we constantly monitor the information that comes in with us. And this document is a living, breathing document. So that was a real most recent change that we got on there. So this once we get it officially approved, you have it in your hands unofficially, but a lot of good information is in here. And your questions tonight have thus far been spot on. With your concerns, your logistic concerns, your healthcare concerns, our special needs concerns. So really, it's been a really collaborative, professional dialogue that we've had back and forth tonight. So I really just wanted to take the time as I've had an opportunity to just view the chat. Really, something that's something that I'm proud of the dialogue, and also my team. And you as our community, the questions that you're answering have been spot on.
Dr. Shirk, this is Bob Lindgren. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, one of the things I wanted to make sure that we got on screen tonight while we're sharing the screen is to literally show people where on the Potts Grove School District site that they can find the document and also post their questions and see the responses. Because we do have a lot of folks here tonight who are both streaming this and are on the Zoom meeting. And I want there to be no question as to where this is and where they can find the responses, find the FAQs and the responses there, so that anybody who hasn't gone to the site and hasn't seen it can literally see where those things are, so that they can, over the next week, find those responses, find where this is going to be and all that stuff. If you wouldn't mind, please.
Dr. Ramage, it magically appears.
And as Dr. Ramage is going through that, let me just remind everyone that that FAQ was put out at about 3 o'clock today. I don't remember exactly what part of my day that occurred, but it was later in the afternoon. So questions that came in after that point in time obviously haven't been answered. However, we'll be monitoring both the community conversation that Dr. Ramage will show you in a minute, as well as any additional questions that came through on the registration/question form for tonight. And we'll continually update that FAQ document for the community.
So I drug on, and it sounds like you guys can see the screen of our main website. Mrs. Bickert does a nice job of including some things as a quick link on the side. So you'll often look there and find what you need, but I'm going to bypass that for a minute because you can find it this way, and you may find more this way as things unfold. So in the Students and Parents tab, it will also point you toward, under letter C, Coronavirus Information and Communications. And then you'll see the opening video that Dr. Shirk put out a week or two ago. And it gives a short description and shows you an icon for the community conversation. You can click there, or you can find that in the left-hand menu as well. And then you'll see that you can add and respond to that by writing your comment and seeing the comments that have been collected and posted there as well. So main website, Students and Parents, and then coronavirus information. And that way you'll land for many different resources. The community conversation, as Mr. Lindgren mentioned, but also our archive communications, information about test site, resources, other things that may come up, and FAQs that we'll post there. Good idea, Mr. Lindgren. Thank you.
So I read a question here that was asking about the meal distribution. Will that be something that's starting up again, especially if we have some of those kids opt for virtual, so they won't be in the buildings at all, and the other kids, even then, would only be in the buildings 2 days a week? Is that anything that's been talked about yet?
Mrs. Custer, that's been talked about, and I'm going to just defer to Dave Nestor because at this time it's something that we like to do. We have to logistically work that out with Chartwells, and I don't know if we've had any. I know we've talked about it, and I'll just maybe defer to Dave to see if there's any next steps with conversations with Chartwells this summer or in the not too distant future.
Obviously, Chartwells is very willing to help us out with that. The question at this point is what allowed us to serve the meals that we did this spring was that the Federal Department of Agriculture allowed us to participate in a program called a seamless summer option for that time period. Basically what that did was it waived the requirement for us to determine whether students are free and reduced students or not. So we could just hand out the meals and everything worked the way we did in the spring. That program has not been opened up again yet for the fall. We're hoping it will be. For those kids that come on Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday, we're working on the idea of providing them with 5 meals, the ability to either purchase or get 5 meals, 2 meals a day for 5 days on their last day that they're in school, the rest of the meals for the last day. So they would get 5 days of meals. We're waiting to see for the virtual students if we have a means of providing food for them as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nestor. You'll keep us posted as that progresses.
One of the other questions that reminded me when Mr. Nestor spoke, and I apologize, I had it here and I forgot it earlier. We talked about YMCA and daycare, but there's also several questions about busing to and from the Western Montgomery Career and Technical Center. So maybe Mr. Nestor, you want to address that as well?
Well, I'll just, I just, we did talk about that earlier. Be happy to talk about it again. That we will run buses back, to the Western Center. Again, it's one of those pieces where the social distancing piece, we're not going to be able to maintain those pieces. We're looking at following the PA regs for that, wearing masks, but we're also going to allow our upperclassmen to drive with parent permission. So that would, in all intent and purposes, that would free up more seats for more social distancing on those Western Center buses. So we would obviously transport in the morning, and we'd still have the AM run. We then have the PM run and bring them back to the building. So those pieces would not change. And obviously, if it's a virtual student, we'd ask them to get to the building. If they're a PM student and they would choose virtual, they would have their classes in the morning because their schedule would be in the morning, and then they would be then bused to the Western Center in the afternoon. So those pieces are all in the works. That would be something we do, if we were all back in, and that will continue. I hope that helps that parent. And Dave Nestor, if you'd like to weigh in for anything I might have missed, feel free.
No, you did very well, Dr. Shirk. Thank you.
I've seen this question pop up a couple times from different people about the, so if a student's in a hybrid program, but they need to be quarantined, will they automatically switch to the virtual program? And if so, then I assume then they're going to have different teachers. But I've seen that pop up more than once, so I figured I'd put that out there.
I did answer that a couple times in the chat, but I didn't get to all of them, so I apologize. But we're trying, by design, we're trying not to have a teacher who would have to teach in the virtual academy and the hybrid program at the same time, because it's really two different schedules and tasks in a way. So if I were a hybrid student and my class would suddenly have to be quarantined, I would switch to remote learning while I'm at home, but it would be that same hybrid teacher who would deliver, instead of delivering 2 sessions face-to-face and 2, it would just become a remote model during that portion of the quarantine. If a family decides to switch after a semester or something and move from a hybrid program into a virtual academy, again, chances are good that it would be the same course, same curriculum. It's still the Pottsgrove staff, but it's likely that would be another teacher, unless it's a specialized high school course where we may only have 1 or 2 people who are certified to provide that instruction. But generally, if a hybrid class needs to quarantine for a period of time, then that instruction wouldn't stop. It would just move from the face-to-face brick and mortar on-site option to a fully remote option during the time of the quarantine.
Dr. Shirk, can I jump in a little bit? I think we can't really stress this enough, that the planning of all this is really going on right now with our building teams. So some of the details that we are describing are where we have our roadmap set up to go. But we need to work through the minute by minute, schedule by schedule of every building to have some of the concrete answers that I think some folks would like to have right now. There's going to be issues around staffing. Who's going to do virtual? Who's going to be doing in person? So these are all things that still need to be worked out. And as much as we've accomplished to this point, there's still that much more to do. And we're working very fast and diligently as we can. But I just think we need to reiterate every so often that understanding that these plans are still not in concrete, and we're working very hard to come up with as much detail surrounding both of these plans, both the virtual academy and the hybrid model, as fast as we can to know exactly what is going to be in the best interest of our students.
without wanting to muddy the waters up too much. And, I'm trying to help here. Sometimes that doesn't go well. We are trying to get everybody answers, and sometimes it sounds like, well, I'm asking a simple question, or what feels like a simple question, and I'm not getting an answer. Please understand that while we're looking at what the children are wanting and what the parents are wanting and everything else, we're also looking at what's going on with some of our staff as well. As we have said from the beginning, we're not going to put our staff at risk either. If we have a staff member who is at risk because of a comorbidity or an existing condition and is not going to be teaching but wants to continue serving on, is not going to take family leave but won't be coming into the building because they're at risk, and that individual may be the only person that teaches a particular AP class, for example. All right. We're probably not going to have the option to be able to teach that class in person because that teacher's not going to be here in person. So that would probably a good candidate for that class to be a virtual class. So, that's probably not going to be a good option for a hybrid class. So you can't really start to put people in that hybrid option. That class would probably be one that would be a virtual class. So now we're going to have to be flexible in terms of how we put kids in that class and how all that's going to work. So it's kind of hard to build schedules around things when we don't know who the people are who are going to be in the building staff-wise or student-wise. So we're juggling, we're talking about what ifs across a myriad of dimensions because all of these things are happening at the high school level, middle school level, elementary level, across teachers and staff and special needs. All of the different pieces are out there. So if we sound like we don't have answers, it's because there's so many variables and so many options that if you throw a hypothetical at us, we can throw just as many hypotheticals back at you and tell you that we can't answer the question. It's not because we don't want to, it's just because there's so many different things at play right now. There's so many different things. We would like to accommodate everybody. And if we start to narrow down the specifics, that we'll probably find a way to accommodate many and most, but not all in every case. So that's what we're working with. And as we get closer, we're going to start to narrow things down and we're going to find ways to accommodate as many people as we can. And maybe it's going to look like those subway pushers that they have in Tokyo, where at the very end you're pushing everybody into the subway cars and just trying to get everybody on there and finding a way to get it all done. And that's what we're going to end up at the end, to try and accommodate everybody one way or another, and that's what we're going to do. It may not be glorious, it may not be beautiful, but we're going to find a way to get everything done because, again, as we said at the beginning, this is our mission, to deliver education to the people of Pottsgrove, to the children of Pottsgrove. And we, working as a team, all of us, the community and the staff, the administration, the teachers, parents, and kids, we're all going to work together to get this done. So I want to thank Dr. Shirk and all of the administrators and all of the teachers, everybody that was here tonight, and my fellow board members, to put this thing together. I think it was a well done 2 hours. Board members or anybody else care to say anything before we wrap up?
Yeah, just one thing. I see a question on here about the, oops, let me put my video back on, sorry. There we go. I see a question on here about the website. Joe Zlomek said he doesn't see an active link where the safety plan, health and safety plan can be downloaded. I don't know if it's on there or not, but I don't know if Lori could take a look at that.
Well, I will request that Tony and Lori and everybody who has anything to do with the website, please take a look at that and please address that for Mr. Zlomek. And if all else fails, A, fix it, and B, send him one directly.
And another question I'm seeing coming up quite a bit here, I don't know that it was answered. Encore for virtual. I know that we had discussed that previously, like a couple days ago. Do we not quite know how that's going to look yet?
We don't, but it is going to be, it is going to be factored in. We feel that obviously there's, the educational value in everything that we do. And I know that specifically to elementary, there's specific pieces there that I know the elementary team of administrators are working out to make sure that the students get those pieces in the both the hybrid and the virtual setting. So that's going to continue to be a work in progress. But that is something that all levels, middle school, high school, and elementary are working on at this time for a clearer picture of what that's going to look like. But the expectation is to have the encores in both hybrid and virtual models.
Thank you.
I see a lot of questions about what the virtual setting will look like. And I know that we've talked about this to some degree, but I'm not sure if it's been expressly said. We are required to take attendance and report attendance, and we are required to hit our minimum number of instructional hours. So at the elementary level, that's 900 hours in the school year, and it's 990 at the secondary level. And so if students are virtual, they will have a full day of work. It will not all be synchronous, but in order to hit those instructional hours, they will be engaged in instructional activities for the bulk of the school day.
Thank you, Dr. Presido, for that explanation. Very, very crucial point. Dr. Ramage, if you would go to really the last slide for us, that would be good. And this really this allows us to think about our next steps. I mean, obviously, we released the phase school plan tonight. We released our current frequently asked questions as of today at 3 o'clock. We'll continue to work on that. Tomorrow, we're going to ask the parents to start thinking about the education options for their students, their kids. That information will then come back to us over the next 7 days. We are also going to collect and analyze. We've already collected. We need to analyze the association's feedback that they gave us for the plan, and then it gives us an opportunity to finalize the parent class list next week. Also next week, and we'll announce the special meeting for this. Mr. Lingler, do you want to announce that tonight, or do we want to just reflect on that and get back maybe to the constituents tomorrow sometime as far as our special meeting to approve this plan? You can think about that for a second, and then finally just take a look at the pieces where we establish our class list, we look at getting back to school, and then of course professional learning that our teachers need over the next really 35 days. We have some things going on within our staff starting next week on the learning management platform of Schoology, as well as professional development on online learning that varies really from videos to real-time discussions with our students. So that'll all be updated, and the staff and that those professional development beginning school will be dedicated to the hybrid model and or the virtual model. And again, last but not least, anything that we plan for could be changed within a day, 2 or a week. So we have to continue to be flexible with those pieces as well. And of course, at the bottom, dialogue with building levels will continue to be ongoing, and as well as our different departments when it comes to curriculum instruction, technology, our business office, our people services office as well, and our integration office as well. Thank you.
we had talked about in terms of having people look at this plan. We wanted to give people time to look at this plan. The idea was that we would roll it out and let the public see this plan, look at it, tear it apart, give us their comments for about a week anyway. This being Wednesday through till next Wednesday. We wanted to see what the flow of comments was like, what the general reception of it was. This town hall is going a long way, I think, to giving people a good introduction to it. There's still going to be a lot of questions, and as the answers come out, there's going to be more questions, there's going to be more details and everything else, and hopefully we'll see comments will either continue to come in and they'll want some more details, or those comments will start to slow down and we'll have a good gauge. Hopefully by next Thursday, we may be able to have a special meeting by then, which I think is the 30th, if I'm not mistaken. And we have that sort of tentatively penciled in. But we're going to wait and see what the pulse is and where people are and how things look. I'll consult with the board and see where they are and how that looks. And that's our tentative date. There's a special meeting. We'll have to advertise it and put it out there so that we have a consensus on that. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Lingard.
Again, thanks for the hard work for everybody that put in. Thank you to our union folks that weighed in, looked at this and reviewed it and gave you the comments. And we look forward to seeing those. And thanks for everybody that joined us this evening. See, we still had a lot of folks that stuck around for the rest of the whole meeting. And thank you for that. Everybody have a good night, and thanks for letting in.
Good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Good
Good
night.
night.
Thanks
Good
for
Good night.
Good night.
Success.